Done.
Excellent. So good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Witt. Like Josh said, I'm VP of Asset Management here at Sanair. I know many of you here from my previous work at Mhc. I have been at Sanair for about 9 months now, and the technical assistance work that we've been putting together is part of the Detroit Preservation Program team, which is led by Enterprise. And I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, know Stacy Esbrook from Enterprise. She's on here as well. She is leading that effort on the Enterprise side. So as part of this team, Sanair is the lead on the technical assistance sessions. We have 6 total. This is the 3rd. And we will have one more each Wednesday over the next 3 Wednesdays, dealing with a lot of different things that are important to developers in the preservation space. So this is all put on together by funding from the city of Detroit. So kudos to them for making this a big priority and for allowing us to have this session out here. We will be recording, as you just heard. So these will be somewhere to be viewed. We haven't quite decided yet where they're going to be posted, but they will be posted for everybody to view after the fact. If you want to go back and look at something or hear something, they will be out there, and we will send that link out when it's available to everybody who's here now. With that, Josh, feel free to fire away.
Thanks, Mike. I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone. So if you do need to talk, you have to unmute yourself. Hopefully, you can hold the space bar down, or you can hit the unmute button, but I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone for right now. So let me introduce our panel. And I'm asked that the panel, when I'm going to say a few words about themselves and their companies. So we have 3 panelists. We have Joe Heafy from Ethos Development Partners, Andy Martin from MHT Housing, and Tim Schrotsky of Elevate Energy. And Joe, I'm going to let you give a little bit about yourself first.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see a lot of friendly faces. Joe Heafy. I'm with Ethos Development Partners. We are developers and consultants in the light tech space. We do work around 4%, 9% preservation. We're actually doing some more RAD conversions with public housing, and do a lot of work around permanent supportive housing. I have, prior to starting Ethos, 25 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. So we have a particular expertise working with nonprofits. And at the end of the day, what we do with the folks we work with is help them navigate the process for doing deals, help them organize the process. And I think what's unique about our approach is that we also teach folks, how this stuff all works. So we look at it as a true partnership as we work together. So thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here, Joe. Much appreciated. Next, we're going to have Andy Martin from Mhc Housing. Andy?
Thanks, Josh. Good to see everyone. Recognize a lot of familiar faces on here. Mention I'm having a little bit of internet instability here. Yeah, I'll try to hop back on. So MHT Housing, so we're full service developer, owner, partner, consultant, all the above. We do construction, management, development, partnership. We help provide with consulting through a recently approved CDFI. Just last week, actually, we were certified by Treasury as a CDFI entity with core community partners. So we're doing so pre-development lending, bridge lending, acquisition lending, trying to fit in, assist where we can. We've been doing a lot of different types of partnerships over the past several years with folks on a many number of projects across the state, but in particular in Detroit. Most of you may recognize me from many years at Mhc prior to this. So I do recognize a lot of familiar faces here, but I look forward to letting everybody know a little bit more about what we can do to assist and how we approach partnerships and from that perspective, and look forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate that. Next, we have Tim Schrotsky of Elevate Energy.
Good morning. I'm Tim with Elevate Energy. We are a nonprofit with a mission to make sure everyone gets access to the clean energy economy. We were created 20 years ago in Chicago to preserve affordable housing on the south side of Chicago and prevent blackouts. That program grew over the last 20 years. We've been working in Michigan for 6-7 years now, preserving affordable housing, helping affordable housing owners with energy assessments, water efficiency, solar assessments. And my expertise is I have a background, I have an MBA with a real estate development background, and I understand pro formas, and I can help owners look at energy savings and how that decreases your operating costs, increases your operating revenue, and how you can borrow more money.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. So that's our panel. We're going to just go ahead and get started with our first question. So what is the process that you go through as a consultant or analyzing someone that comes to you, a new client comes to you, they're not sure if they're going to want you as a consultant or as a partner. So Joe, being that you do both, how would you help them figure out how you can best help them?
Yeah, I think the key thing we look at first is kind of what they want to do with if it's an existing asset, what's the plans for the future, look at their mission, right? It's obviously the goal here is to preserve affordable housing. And then we will look at it through the lens. I always say it's pretty simple, right? How much is it going to cost? And then what structure of financing are you looking at, whether it's the 4% or 9%. We've done deals where we layer in historic tax credits, home funds, other resources that may be available. So, and then if you're looking at the 9%, looking at it absolutely in the context of Mhc scoring. So it's it's not that complicated up front to just do a quick kind of assessment, and that's what we try and do. From our perspective, and this comes from my background in the nonprofit sector, it's very important that the mission is to preserve safe, decent, affordable housing. So so we look for mission alignment, and then we look at the deal.
Excellent. And Joe, let me just ask you: does it take multiple meetings to kind of figure out all those things that you just stated?
Initially, I think it's just we're happy to do preliminary consultations, a couple of meetings just to kind of walk through where things stand. I think there's also a process here, which we discussed kind of in our pre-meeting about this, is whoever we're working with, that's an engagement of partnership, whether from consulting or being a development partner for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. So I think both parties have to also, be comfortable with the approach that each is taking to doing the project, because as we all know who've been doing this, it's, doing applying for credits, closing on credits, getting through construction. It's a 2 to 3 year process, and we should like and trust each other. So.
Excellent. Andy, if I could ask you the same question. So what is your process for evaluating potential partners and consulting opportunities?
I mean, in many respects, it's probably going to sound a little similar to what Joe said, but you're going to approach it from a few different aspects. The first is sort of like mission alignment. Does the outcome we want to achieve align with what the owner who sought us out wants to achieve, and how can we add value to helping them get there? And so we typically will, understand that as a stepping stone, like where they are, where they want to be, not only where they want to be 2 years from now, where do they want to be 5, 10, 15 years from now, and how might we assist in being a part of that? We'll also, because we do so many different things, like I mentioned, construction, management, development, partnership, lending, we'll typically step back and see, what services make most sense for us to assist with. So in many cases, it's not one singular thing, and in many cases, it's probably 1 or 2 or more of those. And so that's typically where we'll start, is to see what makes sense there. But then, I think the key point that Joe mentioned, which makes a lot of sense, is that, we talked in the prep call, it's not a short-term partnership. These things, everyone would always like to have it happen quicker than what it does. So you got to make sure that, what everybody's trying to do, the goals everybody's got align, and that everybody, frankly likes each other at the end of the day, because it's, every time you take one of these on, it takes longer than the time before, it feels like. So we're looking at a 2, 3, 5-year project partnership, depending on the complexity of it. And the other part of it is we want to look at, what level of assistance does the partner we're working with, what do they need, but what do they also bring to help complement, right? So we want to know, like, do they want full service? Do they want somebody who's, just going to help with the Mhc piece and they're going to be kind of the boots on the ground piece? Do they want, somewhere in between? And so it's really just a full scale understanding at the beginning and figuring out where to plug in best from there.
Outstanding. And you covered a lot of ground there, Andy, and there's a lot to consider when taking on a partnership. How important is it? You mentioned the mission. They check that box. What about the skills and like dividing up the responsibilities of who's going to do what? How important is that? And how do you figure that piece out of what skill sets the partner brings to the table and what your skill sets are? How do you bring reconcile that to form a partnership?
It's a great question. I would say, it really is starting with that initial conversation or two to say, what does the partner, what do they know versus what do they need? And we've had partnerships where, it might be somebody who's got like an engineering background and knows a lot about putting together, some of the site planning type activities, but doesn't know as much about financing, for example. And so that might be a situation where you can, that partnership could lean more heavily on us for technical assistance and financing, and lean more heavily, if the owner wants it that way, to do more of the design and planning type work. And so you'll kind of understand those strengths, I think, in the very early stages, what people's backgrounds are, what they really specifically want you to help them with. And I think the key in all of it is to really help, not only just to get somebody to the end, but also help them, learn something along the way as part of it. And likewise, we're consistently learning stuff, right? So that's, I think, the benefit of that partnership is understanding what each brings to the table very early on, and recognizing that probably changes, that both sides probably thought they knew something a little different than what they really know towards the end, and just adjusting as you go through the process.
Yeah. Joe, do you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
We have an announcement in the building. Hold on a second. You know what, guys? Let me step back when they finish this announcement. Sorry.
Hey, no problem. No problem. Well, let's go to Tim. Tim, when you specialize in energy efficiency, and you do consulting with energy efficient upgrades for existing buildings, since we have everyone on here is mostly involved, owns a building already, and so really focus on preservation. How would someone, how do you then evaluate consulting engagements as it relates to energy efficiency?
Well, I think Andy just hit it right on the head. Is like, we're all constantly learning something new. Well, this is something new for a lot of the owners to learn about. So, I think the simplest way to look at it is everyone understands that you need a capital needs assessment, a CNA. You look at your long-term maintenance and HVAC systems, and when you need to replace them and what it's going to cost, right? Well, that tells you nothing about what the opportunities are for how much it's going to cost to run those systems, right? And so that's the learning curve, right? So we come in and we help owners and their maintenance staff and their property managers and their consultants understand what the ramifications are for spending a little bit more, sometimes not even spending more, just being smarter on how you spend your money and incorporating energy efficiency into the building. That creates, savings, your operating costs are lower, and then you can increase your revenue, right? And so that's an important tool that we have found that helps preserve these projects as affordable. You don't have to increase rents to increase revenue, and find other ways to pay for the siding, pay for other upgrades in the building. So, and then solar is I think even bigger learning curve. It's becoming more and more beneficial. Just recently with Develop Detroit, we supported them on a project, University Meadows in the city of Detroit. They put solar on it, and I'm not gonna be too upset with Andy and Mike at Mhc, but Mhc wouldn't underwrite the solar panels, and they had to get additional financing to underwrite the solar. So there's a lot of learning still to be had, but it's clearly something that's making money for Develop Detroit, and they're actually including solar in every project going forward. It may not work out for them, but it's something you should look at if you have the space, if you have the right roof. There's all kinds of rules that you have to kind of follow if you want to look at solar.
Should developers come to you like when they have a gap and they're trying to reduce a gap or something, or should they come to you at the very beginning and making energy efficiency a priority from the very beginning?
So ideally, you have to do it from the beginning. And the biggest issue with coming later and looking for it in the gap is your architect, your construction consultant, your team might have already done a lot of work looking at different HVAC systems. And they may not be upset, right? We were just talking about, we want everyone to be happy on the team. Well, your architect, your construction team is going to be happiest if we look at energy efficiency up front, right? That means they don't have to do the work twice looking at different kinds of systems. We can recommend a system, they can look at it, and you can build it into your pro forma. So before you apply for your low-income housing tax credits, is the ideal time. Consumers Energy, for instance, has a program where they're paying for free energy audits prior to applying for tax credits. That's something we worked with them on to happen. And then the Detroit for the Future Housing Fund has some funds. Obviously, the Detroit Preservation Project, we're paying for energy audits. So it's worth your while to do this. Some more sophisticated owners will actually pay for it, and we work with them on that. But they know exactly what they want. So we're helping these owners in these projects learn about what it means to look at their energy efficiency before you apply for it and how it can help you.
Tim, it sounded like you said that you have a Rolodex of resources that can help bring funding to projects to support energy efficiency. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, in the energy world, like any industry, like the real estate development world, it's good to have relationships, right? You're going to get different prices from different contractors, right? So you have to know what contractors, you have to have a relationship with a contractor to get a good price on an HVAC system or LED lighting upgrade, right? So you have to do that. And then you also have to know when to engage GTE. They might not always be our friend in the city of Detroit, but they have energy efficiency incentives. And it's usually beneficial to have a relationship with DTE and their energy efficiency providers, which is Seal and Walker Miller, and really develop those relationships and understand when is a good time to talk to them about getting these incentives, because they can really make a project pencil out better. So that's really important. I actually have a meeting tomorrow. And I feel like this is a game show, but they're looking for a project or two to do a pilot for energy efficiency for multifamily. So hopefully we can get a project as part of the Detroit Preservation Project in there.
Excellent. We had a question from Anthony Smith. he's wanting to know what is the typical savings amount or percentage that you might see by introducing energy efficient upgrades?
So, at the minimum, 10%. But if we really dig deep, and depending on first of all, the easiest. So let's just talk about the easiest. We call it low hanging fruit: LED lighting, ventilation systems, and various types of HVAC systems. Right. The easiest is LED lighting. Right. If you haven't done that, that's going to create like a 30% saving right off the top. And that's going to be easy. You're going to get a payback within 3 to 5 years. It's really, there's deep discounts on LED bulbs. Doesn't really cost you too much extra. And they last longer, right? And they need less maintenance if you get the right product. So that's a big one. The other big one is not even, energy related, it's water, right? Low flow toilets. If you're building, as long as your runs to your plumbing aren't too long, low flow toilets will work great, even in older buildings. Now, if you have a 20-story building, we'll have to look at it. That might not work well, but so there's a few quirks you have to look at, but low flow toilets are some of the biggest savings. You can save big time on that. And then ventilation systems. If you walk into your main hallways or community space, and you're listening and you're hearing a fan constantly running, something's wrong with your HVAC system, right? You don't want air constantly blowing in there. That's just wasting energy. And that's where sensors come to play. And that's the other big savings, right? Having sensors, and they have really smart sensors nowadays where like you don't have to darken your hallway or your stairwell completely. It can be just a little bit lit so that if someone walked in and it didn't turn on, there's still some light. But even that, you'll save 75% of your electricity on those new modern sensors. So there's all kinds of different ways we can help save energy in those buildings. And it also makes the buildings healthy, right? Our mission isn't just saving energy, giving people access to clean energy economy. We're also looking at making healthy housing, right? What kind of materials you use, better HVAC systems, produce better health for your tenants.
Outstanding. Joe, let me ask you, how would the clients benefit from your Rolodex and the resources that you bring? Because it's more than just, you helping them fill out the application or, get financing. It's, you have Rolodex of contractors and others. So how do people benefit from your Rolodex as well?
So I think the best way to answer that is the way we approach the work. I got into the business of housing over 25 years ago doing community organizing, which is all about relationships. Some of you may know, and I'll slip into it at times, I'm originally from New York City. I ran a statewide tenants' rights organization there. And to me, the whole process is about organizing relationships. Like folks will ask me, well, did you study to be a developer? I'd say, God, no. But you learn it by working with people. So what we do is look at the relationships we have, and with many of the folks on this call, but also look at the relationships that the partners we work with have, and then basically map out a strategy. Because at the end of the day, organizing the architect, the general contractor, your relationships with the city, your relationships with Mhc, relationships with SENER and other groups is critical. So I think it's again, we run a very open book process and a very collaborative process. So we have like Andy and other folks I know on this call, we have a number of relationships with key people. And how do you what I always say is, how do you tell the story of your project to those folks to pull it all together?
Excellent. I'm going to go ask the same of Andy. I mean, I know MHT has now been a CDFI, just another tool in your guys' tool bag. But tell us a little bit more about the resources and Rolodex that MHT has that can help developers?
Sure. So, I mean, in addition, obviously, to the, consulting technical assistance perspective, MHT's been around for about 30 years. So we have, a pipeline, a portfolio of almost 7,000 units of our own that we own, which, that's a lot of communities, a lot of partners. And as Joe rightly pointed out, a lot of key relationships that are developed over time. Likewise, through the management side, we've developed a lot of relationships through 11,000 units of property management that you start to, the key people in the communities, the key issues to look for in putting developments together. And it's just those certain things that are, in many cases learned through a lot of experience, a lot of errors and corrections. That's where you learn, is through making mistakes. And so in a lot of cases, that's where we're able to lean on those relationships, and not only different communities, municipalities, Detroit, a lot of relationships in Detroit with Mhc as well, those sorts of things. But it's relationship driven. And I think what sets us apart a little bit too is we, as you mentioned and I mentioned early on, was this CDFI designation, which, we're new. So there's going to be a learning curve there as a CDFI. There's going to be some, trial and errors through borrowing. But the benefit of being new is you can get creative, make it up as you go, and you don't have as much bureaucracy to deal with perhaps as other more established lenders have as well. So there's going to be, hurdles there, but I think that's a big plus that we can bring to the table, that maybe some of our other counterparts may not when we layer those things in. And that's what we want to try to bring those values to, pass the benefits on to potential partners through, cost and interest savings that where needed. One of the big things that we like to try to bring, particularly when we're assisting, partners, there's a lot of different partners, some who are more capitalized than others. Some may be well capitalized and just not have the expertise in this specific area. Others may need the capital, but also have the expertise. So we like to try to bring the benefit of producing or providing low cost pre-development dollars as part of it where possible. And so we've been trying to bring that to the table. And, those are things you learn how to bring the value through those many years of relationships, what's needed, what's brought to the table early on. And so I think that's what we're, continuing to try to do and pride ourselves in. And as I mentioned, very newly established CDFI. So we're sort of, again, making it up as we go, but that's the beauty of it here a little bit. So we can begin to understand from our partners too, what services should we build out to help provide more and more folks going forward. So.
Andy, because MHC offers so many different services, does that mean that you're going to want a larger percentage of ownership of the general partner interest?
It's a fine balance there, to be honest with you. And some of that's dependent upon the project, the complexity of it. What we're really working with right now is to try to ensure that we can, for the most part, allow as many partners as possible to keep sole general partnership interests. Now, we might be called on to provide guarantees in certain instances, and we want to offer that as a service. We are a nonprofit organization ourselves, so we do have, certain fiduciary responsibilities in that role that we need to make sure we're getting compensated something for that risk, certainly. Just being transparent about that. But we're very heavy in the mindset right now of trying to, these new or even existing emerging development organizations, how can we help them, keep as much of the general partner interest, as much of the developer fee interest as possible so that they can keep their missions going as well. We're working with several partners right now on that same front. We actually are undertaking a fund we'll be launching here shortly that will be focused heavily on that front right there, with working directly with minority, emerging, existing developers who, to allow them to keep those same resources. We're working on actually a joint fund with NEF actually, which is not on the call, but just as for what that's worth, to try to, from a mission perspective as a nonprofit, we're working with that aspect in mind of allowing those folks to keep as much ownership as possible and not step in there ourselves.
That is excellent. Excellent. That question does come up. I think when everyone always wants to know, how do you negotiate ownership interest. If you have a existing development and you're looking at a potential partnership, how do you value the, each person's, what they bring to the table, the guarantees that they're going to be required for new financing? So Joe, is there anything you could add to this about, negotiating the ownership interest?
And I think Andy covered pretty well. I mean, the key things in my mind you look at is who's providing guarantees. Does the group that owns the property or wants to do development have that capacity? Another key piece, especially as many are aware in the 9% world, is experience points. Who can, achieve the maximum on experience points is really important. And I think the other piece is comes back again to something that Andy raised, is kind of division of labor, right? There's there's a menu of things that need to be done in order to successfully develop or preserve a project, and looking at who's doing what. But if I were, so all those things go kind of into the mix to evaluate what is the appropriate percentage. I mean, our approach is similar to what Andy's saying. I think we'd like to see the nonprofit maximize as much of the economics as they can. That's really, I think what's important. We've seen in the past where groups have come in and partnered with nonprofits, and it's kind of almost a bait and switch, and small amount of money that seems like a lot to a nonprofit, and then you never see them again. I think our belief is that we want to leave the nonprofit strong with the economics that they receive in doing a deal.
Outstanding. And does the that's memorialized in a memorandum of understanding? Is that what you're going to assign to memorialize each group's responsibility, Joe?
Yeah, that's what we do. We have a standard form that kind of lays out the responsibilities. So, and there's also we actually have we look at kind of weighting who's doing what. Again, coming back to guarantees and experience points. What is the weight of those items versus the work that's got to be done? And again, as we discussed, it's a 2, 3, 5 year, potentially longer relationship. So all those things are factored in. But the MOU really lays that out so everybody's clear. I would say, it's important to, you don't have to do that first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, first time engaged, but part of that initial engagement is working that out so that that's documented. And it will be a little bit fluid, but at least there's a roadmap.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of going to go between, partnerships and consulting, because depending on people's situation, because when you're having a consulting agreement, you have a fee that's going to be paid up front or at increments, hitting benchmarks, with no ownership interest. So, and I know there's some on the call here that are not sure which way they want to go and what's going to be best for them, either in a consulting, engaging with the consultant, or taking on a partnership. I guess the question is, what advice can we give to our developers who are struggling with that question, and figuring out what's going to be best for their organization long term? Because cash on hand, I mean, in consulting agreement, you got to have outlay of cash up front. Some don't have that. And so are there other ways to compensate them? And what are some of the things that may have helped, or you have seen, or have done to help those organizations figure that out?
So our approach is a little bit different than, maybe MHTs. We're not as big, right? So, but we come in, and like you said, Josh, is kind of base the fees on milestones, so they step up. So our fee structure is pretty reasonable based on how real the deal becomes through the process. And but ultimately you get to the point where, you have a tax credit application, then you're getting an award, then you get into closing. So that's all based on kind of those benchmarks. And ultimately, in our case, similar to, a development partner, our fee is based on, again, those parameters. It's level of effort, are we in any point providing guarantees? Do we need to bring in an experience point partner? Those type of things. So I've been doing this now 7 years with Ethos, and I think we figured out a model that really works for nonprofits precisely because of what you're saying is that, there's risk. There's not necessarily a lot of resources there. And our belief is that we'll take some of that risk with the group up front, assuming there's a feasible deal, right? We also don't want to, as I think we've all talked about, this is a relationship business. You don't want to take people, you want to be upfront with them and say, hey, this is not going to work in the context of a 9% or, the pieces aren't there. But to the extent that it does, we want to take that risk with them.
That's excellent. Tim, you don't do partnerships and you focus just on consulting. How would you answer the same thing? Organizations struggling with, the fees to pay for the consulting, but they want to work with you.
I think, first of all, we'll work with any owner and have meetings with them to help them kind of craft some goals for their projects so that they can understand what's actually feasible. And then we guide them down a path where they can look at different, avenues to pay for the work, right? There's grant funding. I just talked about, there's ways, a lot of the financing, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have green financing tools that will build energy audits into the financing. And then if you achieve certain goals in that, you get discounts on basis points. That can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars over, the lifetime of those loans. So there's real large savings, but we've had folks try to look at those financing tools at the, at the end when they're trying to fill a gap. And it's really, really difficult to get to that point because you've already kind of designed your building. But in the very beginning, you start looking at it holistically. You can get to that point where that extra financing, that extra help in the financing will put you over the top. The Detroit Future Housing Fund also has a green P&A option that you can go with. So there's lots of different ways to pay for our services if you can't right away. But like I said, the second time around, we find that owners start to look for ways to pay us and start to find crafty ways to get us on their team in the beginning after they've experienced it, right? Word of mouth or experienced, when a project goes well, that's the best business you can have. I'm sure that's the same for MHT and Ethos. When you have a successful project, people understand what they're paying for.
So just to summarize, it sounds like what you're both saying is that there's solutions out here. You will help find resources for those that are strapped for resources to cover your fees. And that secondly, that it's an investment, if you will, is going to help save you money, make your project more successful, and working with you early on in the process rather than trying to fix something afterwards, later in the process.
Yeah, and it's all about those relationships, right? I build a relationship with an owner, and then I have relationships with DTE and other folks, and I can connect them, when it's needed for these different programs. So it all works out, and in the end, we're a nonprofit as well, and we just want to tell stories, right? We just want other owners to see success, So that's our ultimate goal.
That's great. I want to move this along into one of the areas that can be a sticking point is some some owners or developers may feel that, hey, since they're paying a consultant a fee, that you should do all the work. And they may be not as timely on their commitments. And so, Andy, I would ask you, how do you deal with those types of situations where, they're kind of gotten off track, they're not, hitting their benchmarks or following up on their commitments? How do you get things, moving forward, or how do you handle those situations?
Well, I think it's one of those things that goes right back to the first few conversations, right? Is like starting to understand and lay out what everybody's expectations of the others are. And there's no doubt there's times when, it's easy to sit on a panel and make it seem like everything is all rosy all the time. There's no doubt there's times when, there's friction points, but that's the importance of those early conversations.
Andy, you're it's kind of internet.
It's a partner on the end goal, like you're really trying. Am I losing you guys?
Yeah. Can you try to repeat that again?
Andy, you might have better luck if you turn off your video.
I've heard that as well, yes.
All right, give me that. I'll give that a shot. Can we start back at 11:30? Start back all over? Like to get everything in here. So I think it's just about creating reasonable expectations with each other. Like I was saying, it's not all rosy all the time. You establish those trust issues early on. I feel like, and understanding that, like, if you do run into timing issues, it's being clear about what those timing issues are, what issues they're creating for funders in the project, what it might mean in terms of dollars, those sorts of things to try to work it out. I mean, we're happy to, in some cases, try to do everything, or we're happy in some cases to lean on the partner if that's how they want to do certain things. And if they want to do that, they're just going to have to, you'll have to just keep working through those issues to get toward the completion goal.
And it's fair to say, Andy, that
What I would add.
Oh, go ahead, Joe, please.
No, I don't. Go ahead, Josh. You're the moderator. I don't want to.
No, I was going to go ahead, Joe, please.
So what I was going to say is, and everybody who's done this work, is that this is hard work, and it's complicated, and it's frustrating, and it requires a lot of patience. It can be emotionally draining. It runs the gamut, right? And I always say to folks when we're engaged that, in a partnership is upfront is inevitably we're going to be annoyed with each other about something, right? And is to not pretend that that's not going to occur, right? Because inevitably we're going to drop the ball on something, they're going to drop the ball on something, and it's understanding that you're working in a partnership in this complex environment. From a process perspective, to make sure there's constant engagement, when the way we structure our work is we have regular meetings. We're working off an agenda. This goes back to my community organizing days. It's having that agenda and making sure that everybody's walking out with what they understand they need to do next. That provides accountability for the next meeting. It also provides an opportunity for someone to come back and say, hey, I said I would do this and I ran into these kind of issues. And not that you're not communicating between meetings, but they may, by the point of the next meeting, say, I've tried everything, and come back, well, okay, let's solve that problem. So it's kind of just a typical thing that folks say, but communication and honesty, right? Like I think, if you don't recognize that we're human beings, as I said, doing complex projects, and acknowledge that, at points you're going to say, hey, you didn't get this done, but that's done from a point of respect and the goal of getting the deal done. I think, that makes the whole process work better.
That's great. There is, I've heard the saying, developers say that you don't do development, you survive development, because of all of the stresses and windy roads and things like that. And, you know, when you're in a relationship for years, right? Like at minimum, just getting a development is going to be, you know, off the ground a couple years before you might even get see you know, anything of structures built. And you got lots of money on the table as well. Which brings me to Kathy's question. Do you find it difficult combining the requirements of the different agencies such as MSHA, NPS, the city, and adding energy efficiency, Tim? You had mentioned that MSHA would not approve the solar. Do you think that working together as true partners to find solutions is happening in the development world? And what can we do to create that type of working relationship?
Or, you know, I think we've, you know, when Andy was at MSHA, we talked a lot about, you know, getting the MSHA underwriters comfortable with solar, because, you know, Develop Detroit and was easily, not, I wouldn't say easily, but was able to find, you know, some other financing that put the solar on the project, right? And that was for a 4% deal. 9% deals don't have that problem because MSHA's not underwriting those loans. But it, you know, there's just a comfort level with, you know, the technical analysis on energy efficiency as well. Sometimes some of the MSHA underwriters won't accept that LED lighting or a really high efficiency boiler or something is going to create as much savings. They've questioned those. And that's just, it's just about, you know, building relationships. There are best practices. We actually have a document that we helped author with a group called Energy Efficiency for All that actually goes through some of these best practices for underwriting for energy work. And, you know, it's becoming less of an issue. There's more and more projects now in Michigan with solar on affordable housing that it's probably not going to be an issue for long, but you know, it's that learning curve, right? It's learning something new and doing something new. You know, in the state of California, building code requires you to put solar in all single family homes. It's probably something that's, you know, you can bypass out of it, but that's the baseline. So that's probably coming to much of the country on much of our projects, right? It's too easy, it's too cheap, too much revenue to be had to look at solar on your roof.
Excellent. One of the challenges I think that I've noticed, and I want to ask the panel this, is does your expertise in working with partners, you know, or a consultant assignment, is it sometimes someone that you work an executive director is overwhelmed with things running a CDC in addition to working on a development or recapitalizing? Do you find that you bring your expertise to help them as their entire organization, or are you only focused on the development at hand? And do you find yourself helping in other areas to help move their organization forward, kind of overlapping the two, you know, the initiative of a new development or recapitalization and helping with their existing operations? Joe, do you find yourself in that situation?
I wouldn't say with existing operations, but I would say with fundraising. So, you know, we will look at the project in context, depending on what the project is, the context of philanthropy too. And is it advancing the organization's mission? We just did a project with COTS where, you know, we, and also with Lighthouse in Oakland Park, Oak Park, where we helped them with, you know, fundraising around the project itself, which actually ended up benefiting the organization too. So again, from my background and our team's background, we come out of the nonprofit sector. And so we do look at it holistically as, you know, not just getting the deal done, but how does it help your organization? And does that deal actually end up leveraging additional resources that you may not have been able to tap into before? So, so we don't really want to get into the kind of strategic pieces, but if our work can benefit the organization at a broader level, we want it to, and we want to help with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the fundraising. We did a survey at the beginning, and that actually was an area that people wanted some guidance on. Joe, do you feel you're strong in that area and in helping create fundraising strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know it really well. When I worked for NSO, I was inevitably the person running our fundraising department when somebody left. So I know that piece really well. I would say that we don't position ourselves, though, as capital campaign consultants. We will work and interact with capital campaign consultants because ultimately there's synergy there for raising funds. But we do understand the broader context of these projects within leveraging additional resources for an organization, and are happy to give feedback and advice on that.
Excellent. Is there, Andy, is there anything that you would tell us, could tell us about, what you're seeing going on in Detroit in the LIHTC world? And, you look at a lot of different deals, and many on the call have just a few deals that they see and they're engaged on. But then being that you see so many deals, submitting new applications for financing, what would you say, a little bit of advice and what you're seeing trends as far as the preservation of affordable housing in Detroit?
What I think you would see, and others, probably seeing this too, is there's a lot of continuously in Detroit, a lot of different strategies that are trying to be achieved, whether it be downtown creation of new units, whether it be trying to touch the neighborhoods with a little bit smaller type developments, or whether it be an effort to focus on preservation of existing. I know the preservation of existing, like this group, has been a focus for a long time in the city. The city has more units than anywhere else in the state as far as existing affordable units. And so I know that's a huge focus of the city and the staff that are working there. A lot of conversations we have with the staff level folks at HRD who are, to be honest with you, they're doing a lot of creative things to be, I think, to get some of these deals continue to stay affordable long-term, things we haven't always seen historically. And I think that's kudos to them, but also kudos to groups like this that are helping keep the conversations going and making them aware of how important it is. So I think it's the thing that I do think is important when working with the city, though, is it's back to the same conversations we've had here with partnerships, is talking with them early about potential options of, maybe you have a project that has some existing City of Detroit funding in it in some way, talking with them early about getting creative about ways to either maybe they'll leave some of it in there or require partial repayment, or maybe they'll consider different repayment terms or different tax abatements or those sorts of things. I think that's a very important thing in the city right now. The other thing I think that's important is the continued work with MSHA and HUD from the perspective of trying to make sure that whatever your project looks like is going to have a place in one of those programs for a refinancing strategy. So, MSHA obviously goes through various iterations of QAP rewrites and lending rewrites and things like that. The city's oftentimes been pretty good about making sure there's a place for new city developments in there, but I think it's important to make sure there's a place for preservation of city developments, whether it be MSHA financed or LIHTC. And I think those are a lot of the struggles you're seeing right now with the new 4% credit come through at the federal level for refinancing some of these projects is a very, very important tool. But I think we want to make sure too that there's still an avenue for most of these projects to have a path to get done. So it's not all of them will still work under that path. It's just figuring out very early, very regularly, what's going to make the most sense, because there's a lot of different strategies going on all the time with the city.
Andy, do you have any idea if MSHA will resume with single family scattered site light tech developments? Will they do that, go back to that well again?
Did I lose you guys again?
No, you're back now.
Okay, I have any idea if Mishta does what?
Oh, if they
has
will
better internet than I'm using right now.
Yeah, if they'll pay for everybody's Wi-Fi. No, I was asking, do you have any idea if MSHA might resume with 9% tax credits on single family scattered site developments?
I think it's going to be one of those things that's not going to be a likely priority for, quite honest. I'll certainly allow for constraints. So whether it's going to have to be some sort of a like subdivision style, congregated type homes rather than scattered all over. If you can do something like that, I think absolutely it can be done, and they'll continue to do that. But if it's, the model we saw over, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where those homes would be scattered over 20 to 25 blocks, I don't know if they're going to be as supportive of that long term. I think it's going to have to be more of that subdivision style development, and it's going to have to be in the right location, make the most sense. But I think it's possible that it's just going to have to look that way.
Okay. It was just a question I had. I know we have some single family developers on here, and just wondering, I had that question in my mind for a while. I see other states, doing that. And it's becoming, there's a big article this week that, there's big institutional investors that own thousands and thousands of single family. And now you have, single family home developers, like, I don't know if it was Pulte, but companies the size of Pulte that are building, $250,000 houses for the sole purpose of being rentals and not for sales. So that trend throughout the nation, especially on the coast, is something that we're going to see more of, where you have, brand new houses being offered for rental. And I just wondered if we might see that in the affordable realm come back here in Michigan. Joe, was there anything that you would add about what you're seeing in Michigan or in Detroit, I should say, as far as the preservation of affordable housing?
No, I mean, I really don't have much to add than what Andy said. I mean, I think the city's been great about getting in front of it. The city team's great to work with. I think, I'm talking to Mike and others about some projects that we're looking at that are preservation deals. So this kind of group of folks who are providing TA is great. My position from most of my career is there's never going to be enough funding to build new affordable housing. We need to preserve what we have and make it better for folks. So I think the preservation strategy is just critical, to make sure that people have quality affordable housing and we don't lose it. Losing it just adds to the problem. So.
Did anyone, there was a paper that came out, it's called the Year 15 in the Preservation of Low-Income Tax Credit Projects, Lessons from Detroit, Michigan, from ACSP, the organization, I think with funding from the University of Michigan. I can send that out. I found that there was a lot of lessons to be learned from that paper. And to preserve housing, we have to learn from the past, right? And some of the challenges, reaching year 15, and the projects have some deferred capital needs. but the cash flow hasn't kept up. So what are we going to do to preserve those units? I hope everyone learned something here today about working with consultants. I'm going to open it up. I know there's got to be some questions. These are your chance. We can just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have it. I know Pat usually has 4 or 5 questions. So Pat, you got a question for our panel here? Nothing. Okay. Tony does. Mr. Russell.
Well, I'll just make a statement and ask the panel to comment. So I'm a big advocate for single family housing. We do have a project with 45 single family homes. I'm a pastor, and so I get to see sometimes 3 and 4 families in one home. And so I wanted to just be a strong advocate for single family housing. When you think about the economics of it, you put somebody in an apartment, they could never own it. But right now we're transitioning our residents to ownership, and it's an economic factor. It's building family growth, family wealth. A lot of people left their apartments during COVID and bought single family homes. Children need yards. They need places to grow. I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll take a shot at it. I agree that it's been one of those things that seems like over the years has always had a place. It's just been one of those things that the rental affordable industry, I think, has struggled with a bit. But there are some great examples of it. I mean, Joe, you've worked with a couple of great clients I know of that have had, similar examples that are great. That single family detached rental setting that makes some sense, and it does have a place. I actually am, we're watching some different market type data and things, and you're starting to see that even from a senior perspective, where it's like they'd rather be in a detached single family rental than to be in a multifamily high rise, And so I think that the thing about it is it's just one of those things that needs to be more thoughtfully thought through. Look at the lessons of the past, of the things that didn't go right, whether it's making the numbers work from a budget perspective to better maintenance, whether it's maybe the initial renters aren't quite as low of income, so you can set them up. They're still affordable low income renters, but you can set them up for a better home ownership strategy, those kinds of things. But it's tough. The math is very, very tough on making those numbers work. For us, even as a, Tim or Joe or Josh or I, to go as a consultant, put these things together, but then to sell it to a tax credit investor who's got to buy the credits and say this thing is going to work for X number of years and things like that. It's not impossible. It's just there's a lot of pieces that have to come together that are very tricky to pull together. But from a policy perspective, I mean, you're absolutely right. The high rise style doesn't make sense for everybody. The home ownership, the single family detached may make sense in more instances. It's just so tough to make the math work. It's just a math problem is what it ends up being.
I would add the thing that's the thing that's been missing since the recession, not this one, the prior one, because when I worked at Lighthouse in Oakland County, we did 70 plus single family homes for sale, infill housing for first time low income home buyers. I mean, that's just gone away, right? It used to be that you could get home funds to help offset the cost of construction, and then I wasn't in Detroit at that point, but in Pontiac, you get the home funds to help offset cost of construction, and then home funds to help subsidize the mortgage. That model's pretty much gone away. And I think part of the challenge too that everybody needs to be aware of, which I know Andy and all of us can speak to, is the cost of construction is through the roof. I mean, it makes it really, really hard to make these things pencil in a way that's going to work. I mean, the greatest threat we have to affordable housing right now is construction costs. It's just so many deals are struggling to, get funded, and then when they get funded through MSHA, I think somebody asked the question, what are some of the hurdles? Is, you may submit an application to MSHA assuming X dollars with a 5% inflator by the time you close. Well, in Detroit, if by the time you close, it may have gone up 15%. Then you're upside down by the time you need to close. So it's a long way of saying that I think, Tony, yes, absolutely, there's a need for it, but I think that's an advocacy piece that's got to occur. And I think, the whole home ownership piece has dropped since the recession. You just don't see groups doing it as much anymore.
Thank you.
This is Tim. I've got a few things on this topic. First, there is the Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact that I sit on. It's hosted by Detroit Future City, and that group is specifically looking at single-family homes, how to preserve them, how to get the rental market in that market upgraded, but then also how to get some of those families into those homes. So that's a really great network to connect with, Tony. Number two, this Detroit Preservation Project does have some single-family home work that we're working on, where we are looking at actually expiring LIHTC homes and putting them and transferring the ownership over to the families. And one of the things that Elevate supported them on is DTE is supporting that project with some health and safety and energy efficiency upgrades, so that when these families take over those homes, their bills are actually lower for their utilities, so they can afford it more. So that's a great avenue. And then what Joe just talked about, Elevate, we're dedicated to workforce development, supporting minority contractors. And during COVID, or during the beginning of COVID, I guess it's still COVID, right? But last year, during COVID, we actually moved some of our funds, our foundation funding, and we actually gave loans to minority HVAC contractors, clean energy contractors, folks who were doing solar or different kinds of work that we support, loans. And we're also dedicated to building up smaller contractors, getting them access to projects. I don't know if folks know, but one of the reasons why construction costs are increasing is because, when you look at the market in Detroit, try to make this really quick, before the housing bubble, right? We're going to go way back to the housing bubble. We had a healthy construction industry, right? Housing was going like crazy. Then, that whole industry collapsed and it grew back up. We actually have about the same amount of workers now than we did then, but we have less companies, right? And that is a big problem, right? So we have, everything is consolidated. And so we've got more of these larger companies, and they're driving up the prices. And we need to build up the smaller contractors, right? In the neighborhoods that are doing the work, we need to build up those contractors. So I actually have a link to, we're funded by Comcast. We do a lot of our funding comes from large tech companies. They're really interested in equity and carbon and reducing their carbon footprints and taking credit for it. And so they actually have a grant, and I can share it with folks. I'll put in the link here. It's a $10,000 monetary grant to small businesses, specifically in Detroit. It's really easy to apply for. So if you know of a small HVAC contractor, someone in the construction industry who's struggling a little bit and could use an infusion to help their business, you should definitely share that. And then finally, this is a little bit more futuristic, but we are testing out the waters on it. We're looking at, so another tech company, I can't say who, really wants to take credit for carbon reductions. And they're asking us if they can infuse money into affordable multifamily housing projects and reduce the carbon footprint of that building, and they can take corporate credit for the carbon reduction, right? So it's an equitable way for them to reduce their carbon footprint as a large corporation, right? Infusing money into affordable housing. We're hoping that that's successful, and maybe that's a new avenue of getting money into affordable housing. I don't think that's something that's going to blossom here in the next 6 months, but maybe in the years to come, that might be the new tech, carbon tech.
Thank you. Wow.
Well, thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question for Tim. So, Tim, I know you mentioned briefly some of the ways that there can be energy savings. What are you seeing across multifamily properties in Detroit in terms of average per unit per year, utility and energy costs? And what would you consider to be the ideal per unit per year cost?
Mute. I was on mute. That's a great question. And I don't have a good answer for that, the average cost per unit, primarily because, units can be different in what kind of appliances they have and the size of the units, right? And then, some buildings are boiler, where the owner pays for the heating, and then some units pay for their own heating. So that's a difficult question for me to answer. I supported some projects recently, actually, looking at the average price per unit, but that was just one specific, that was a townhome project, and they were paying electric and gas, and I forget what it was, but it was, somewhere in the $100 range. I know that, we recently supported a project with, this was, a little anecdotal, but we recently supported a project with Midtown Detroit Inc., some eco homes, in that they were, a couple of them were going to be preserved for renting at affordable rents. Some of them were sold at ridiculous prices. But the homes, 1,500 square foot home, designed, efficiently, electric bill was $60 a month. And we presented that at a Detroit, Midtown Detroit meeting. And there were folks in there they're like, no, that's not how much electricity a house uses. They were like laughing us out of the room, right? So that's a new construction, very efficient home, but you can see, how low you can get. $60. I mean, that's pretty good. My home uses more than $60 of electricity. I'll tell you that right now.
Pat, you have a question?
I put it in the chat. What are your thoughts about the lease to own as a pathway to home ownership?
Is that in the context of a LIHTC program?
Yes,
Pat?
yes, that's correct.
So Pat, is that, at year
I mean, I
15,
think-
you're saying converting and doing a lease, then a 5-year, 10-year lease?
Right.
And then they would own it at the end of that lease period?
That's correct. As a path toward home ownership. Especially
Got
if you have a regulatory agreement that does advocate that there be home ownership opportunities at the end of year 15.
Well, I would say that it's anything that's going to improve home ownership rates is a good thing. The challenge is that, does the hard debt that you have on the development currently, and does it allow for the sale of houses one at a time, and making lease ownership to make that possible? So you're gonna have to have some type of flexible financing that will allow you to allow that possibility. But if you can get over that hurdle, I think that's a great way to go.
I think that the city of Detroit is a key factor in that decision-making because, as Corey knows, many of the projects that were funded 15 years ago as scattered site single-family homes had home funding, and that debt is still very real. So Corey, would we make an appointment with you early on, as was stated by the consultants, to discuss the home funding and what our options might be?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've already started working a little bit with Scenair and Cleveland Housing Network on a pilot, so that when LIHTC properties pass their 15-year period, but they're still in their home compliance period, we've put together some framework already as to how to treat that existing home debt and what, if any, additional affordability would be applied to the new homeowners. So absolutely, we can schedule time to talk through it.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
Pat, I
one
think
more question, if I could
Yeah,
entertain.
absolutely.
What we're finding is by polling our tenants, we're trying to find out how many of the 50 units would be interested in becoming home buyers. And many of them, because we started the process a year ago, have gone and taken home buyer education classes, and they feel, and they've also, they say they're approved by a lender to become, that they're already mortgage ready. The problem is that the steps that we're putting them through are delaying their possibility of becoming home buyers. So what advice would you give us to tell to them so that we don't discourage them from the fact that they took initiative to do home buyer training, and also are, according to them, mortgage ready to buy the home right now?
Well, that's a tough one. There's certain steps that need to be followed. The fact that they are ready, they're a little bit ahead of, where the development is at. And so there's, you just got to get things in order with the development to make the homes eligible to be sold. That's a great thing that they're anxious and wanting to do it. I do know that home buyer certification upon completion, I think that only lasts for 12 months. So that can create a challenge and create some angst if they have to go through that training again. But it's each individual development has some work to do. And I would say that they need to get in contact with one of these consultants and start putting together a plan, start talking to Mhc, their limited partner, and really start formalizing a plan, because obviously you have buyers ready to go. And we've seen that. I think we had a couple years ago, we've had a number of people that were ready at various times during their leasing term where we were still in the 15-year compliance period and we weren't able to sell houses. So you're going to lose some good people, but the sooner we can get things in order and get the partnership ready and eligible for the transition, the better off and the happier your residents will be.
Thank you.
I did put the article or the report from year 15 preservation in the chat. If you haven't seen that, it's a PDF. You just select the 3 dots on the side and you can open it up in the viewer and then save it to your local desktop. So please do that before we end, because it will probably go away until, I guess, maybe on the recording. I've never attached the file. It might be in the recording when we able to send that out. Are there any other questions? I don't want to miss anyone. Well, we got 3 minutes. We're ending 3 minutes early. Maybe we can all go to Amazon and buy some of that coffee that Anthony was telling us about with that 3 extra minutes. We appreciate you guys' time. Hope we all learned something, move our developments forward. I don't have anything else. Adios, amigos.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Right.